If freedom means doing whatever one wants, why do those who chase limitless choice so often report anxiety, restlessness, and a lack of direction? The common definition of freedom, absence of constraint, produces a puzzle. Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani argues that the path to real freedom runs through obedience, not rebellion. At first, this sounds counterintuitive, yet the claim is philosophically precise. Freedom is not the ability to act without limits. It is the capacity to act without inner compulsion. Voluntary obedience to the divine order trains willpower, stabilizes emotion, and restores coherence. From a neuroscientific perspective, disciplined practice strengthens prefrontal control over impulses. From a psychological perspective, internalizing meaningful structure increases autonomy, not decreases it. The result is a form of freedom deeper than external independence, freedom from the tyranny of impulse, fear, and fragmented identity. Modern culture equates freedom with unconstrained choice. However, behavioral science repeatedly shows that many of our choices are automatic reactions shaped by habit loops, reward schedules, and environmental cues. In Libet's experiments, preparatory brain activity precedes the conscious decision to act, suggesting that what we label free choice is often a post hoc narrative. While interpretations of Libet's work are debated, the broader point stands. Impulses frequently initiate action before reflective awareness. Does variable reward systems typical of social media feed the brain's dopaminergic circuits to seek novelty on a schedule it does not control? The experience feels voluntary, but the pattern is conditioned. People mistake compulsion for freedom. Consider a familiar case: late-night scrolling. The behavior is framed as me time, but the person wakes up exhausted, less focused, and more irritable. Autonomy, in the external sense, no one forbade the scrolling coexists with internal enslavement to a loop. The mismatch generates dissonance. I can do anything, yet I can't do the one thing I intend. Sleep on time. External independence without internal order is not freedom. It is entropy. The task is not to expand options indefinitely, but to cultivate a will that is responsive to truth rather than to impulse. Sheikh Abdul Qadir, a jurist and spiritual teacher of the Qadiriya order, places servitude to God at the center of spiritual maturity. Servitude, in his usage, is calibrational alignment with the real. His teaching can be summarized: he who obeys God becomes free from everything else. When one aligns with what is ultimately real, one ceases to be captured by what is merely compelling. Psychologically, this echoes self-determination theory. Autonomy does not mean absence of structure. It means endorsing a meaningful structure as one's own. When values are internalized, discipline becomes self-chosen and agency increases. For Jilani, human will is a trust to be trained. Disobedience is not evidence of autonomy. It is evidence of misalignment between will and wisdom. The first step toward freedom is mastery over desire. The slave of lust cannot be the servant of God. If impulses dictate action, there is no genuine choice to exercise. Ritualized self-control, such as scheduled prayer, fasting, or governed speech, recruits and strengthens prefrontal circuits responsible for response inhibition and top-down regulation. Repeated enactment builds neural efficiency for restraint. Research on self-control indicates that consistent practice improves confidence in one's regulatory capacity and clarifies decision thresholds. Disciplined routines reduce cognitive load and increase behavioral stability. For instance, Someone who sets a fixed digital sunset and pauses before responding to provocation may, after several weeks, find emotional reactivity diminished. What began as obedience to a rule becomes freedom from triggers. Obedience to principle does not diminish will. It concentrates will. Jilani frames obedience as submission to truth as it is, not as one prefers it to be. The refusal to accept limits produces friction that feels like suffering. Acceptance reduces unnecessary pain. In acceptance and commitment therapy, psychological flexibility increases when actions are aligned with values while acknowledging constraints. From a predictive processing perspective, the brain seeks to minimize the gap between its models and reality. Acting in accordance with how reality is structured reduces error and distress. A professional who resists a long rehabilitation after injury and tries to push through experiences intensified pain and slower recovery. When the person aligns behavior with medical reality, rest and gradual effort pain decreases and function returns faster. The rule felt restrictive but produced mobility. Freedom emerges not by rewriting the laws of life, but by consenting to them intelligently. Disobedience, in Jilani's analysis, often arises from the ego's impulse to assert separateness and control. Obedience to the real exposes the contingency of the ego and loosens its grip. Persistent self-referential rumination is linked to elevated brain activity in the default mode network. Practices of surrender-structured prayer, service, gratitude quiet this activity and reduce anxiety. As the self-story loosens, reactivity declines. A person who practices anonymous giving and silent commutes may report fewer spirals of social comparison and a more stable mood. The loss of egoic narration yields a gain in clarity. To obey truth is to be released from the illusion that the self must control everything to be safe. Freedom is not the absence of authority. It is the presence of a trained will. Jilani emphasizes willed submission, not coerced compliance. Choosing obedience exercises the will. Consistent moral and ritual practice encodes reliable action pathways. Behaviorally, it converts effort into habitomatic virtue with stability. Musicians practice scales, not to restrict creativity but to unlock it. Technique enables improvisation without collapse. Likewise, disciplined obedience furnishes stable responses, making one freer in complex moral situations. A manager who pre-commits to assuming good intent and asking clarifying questions prevents escalation and preserves options. Obedience matures from impulse-driven to valor-driven, expanding effective freedom. Disobedience markets itself as autonomy but typically produces fragmentation. When one rejects intelligible order, one becomes dependent on mood, fear, and shifting incentives. Freedom without structure is entropy movement without meaning. Divine law supplies the gravitational field in which human potential can orbit coherently. Remove gravity and you get drift. Obedience is not blind conformity. Jilani rejects mechanical worship. He insists on understanding and intention. The intellect must perceive the point of the command. The heart must endorse it. Values must be understood, then internalized. Stable reference points law, principle, purpose improve. Neuroscientifically, consistent rituals strengthen prefrontal networks, decreasing impulsivity and emotional volatility. The subjective result is spaciousness, more time between stimulus and response. The freest individual is not the one with no rules, but the one whose rules align with reality and are chosen with understanding. Adopt a brief, internal question before acting. Is this obedience to truth or to habit? This metacognitive pause shifts processing from automatic to deliberate. Even a 3-second check recruits prefrontal oversight and reduces impulsive errors. Choose 2 small, consistent behaviors, such as a fixed bedtime or a no-gossip rule. Stable micro-disciplines produce macro-stability by anchoring rhythms and reducing decision fatigue. When a plan is blocked, name the limit and reframe it as training, not punishment. This acceptance reduces reactivity and improves flexibility. Consent to constraint becomes a form of calm. Join a community or mentorship structure that reinforces value-aligned obedience. Public commitments increase follow-through, and feedback calibrates effort. Environmental design also helps. Remove cues that trigger disobedient loops, and add cues that prime obedience. Changing cues often outperforms willpower alone. Obedience is understood as intelligent. Alignment with the real produces the only freedom that lasts. Disobedience promises autonomy but yields anxiety and fragmentation. Obedience appears restrictive but generates coherence, clarity, and strength of will. Internalized structure increases true autonomy. Disciplined practice strengthens prefrontal control and reduces impulsive reactivity. Serving the real dissolves servitude to illusion. Real freedom is not the right to do whatever one wishes. It is the power to act without inner conflict. When will, reason, and reality align, choices become lighter, actions cleaner, and life intelligible. The one who obeys truth no longer negotiates with chaos, and, in that stillness, discovers freedom not as a mood, but as a stable capacity.